Welcome to the Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen, the show where we get you guys at home into the studio. As you can see, I am over the moon. We're talking about Manchester United and their loss to Liverpool. Joining me today is Michael McCubbin, facing the fans he is. Unlike Joe the Rat Tomlinson, won't face up to the pressure. Every time Chelsea lose, I'm here. I'm here to talk to you guys. When United lose 7-0, he has disappeared. Oh, it's my birthday. I've taken the week off. Lies. Lies. However, we have got a Manchester United guest joining us today. Lyes, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm good, bro. I'm good. First of all, thank you for having me. And second of all, Zach, if you weren't to show up when Chelsea lose, you wouldn't be in the studio often, bro.
Yeah,
so
you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. You're not wrong at all. It's been a rough couple of months. And so that is a very good comeback. I'll eat a bit of humble pie and go from there. But look, as we said, we want to talk about Manchester United, and actually a little bit less so exactly about the game and more so kind of the impacts from it and what we could see happen and maybe what the next stages are for Erik ten Hag and Manchester United. Now, how crazy a week can be, guys. 7 days before that game, lifting the Carabao Cup. I've got many videos of some of the Manchester United fans I know celebrating and sending me a lot of celebrationary photos, I think is one way to put it. You enjoyed yourself on that night, didn't you?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
Had a good
myself
time?
And Joe Tomlinson, yeah.
Indeed. 7 days later, they lost 7-0 at Anfield. And so, look, that's the last time I'll mention the 7-0 loss. Look, let's also put things into context. United's fixture schedule has been crazy. They're essentially averaging a game every 3 days, which is tough. It's really tough to compete if you obviously want to go far in every single competition. That's being a great team, to put it quite frankly. Lots of teams have to deal with this, and that is something that Manchester United are having to deal with at the moment. 21 games in 75 days. But Mikey, I want to come to you first. Is this just a blip, or is this maybe something to be concerned about in the future as well?
I mean, we hope it's a blip. Obviously, this is the first kind of bump in the road since United have kind of got their act together under Erik ten Hag. Obviously, that the kind of last comparable result to this was back in August, that 4-0 loss to Brentford. And after that game, ten Hag, really stamped his authority, didn't he? He made the players run whatever it was, 21k or whatever the next day, ran it with them, dropped Ronaldo, ended up dropping Maguire as well, club captain. And yeah, that was the kind of first steps towards him really imprinting himself on the club and building, kind of reshaping the culture of the dressing room. So this is the first time he's had to deal with something like this since then. And there aren't quite as many easy ways out here. He's been with this squad for a while. A lot of the players who he's trusted for so long were some of the worst performers in this game. They are Ten Hag players. So yeah, there isn't necessarily like an easy way out for him from this one. I think this is in some ways going to be a bigger challenge for him because the games are coming thick and fast, important games as well. Betis on Thursday, Southampton at home on the weekend, which yes, very winnable game, but also one of those games that if you don't win, suddenly at Man United, that's considered a crisis. And yes, suddenly, top four could become questionable. Comfortable in top four at the moment, but a couple of more losses down the line. So yeah, I think at the moment it is just a blip. I think the evidence of the last 3 months is enough to I think be confident that this is just a blip. However, those last 3 goals conceded, I think make that result different in many ways because that head loss that was suffered by the team in the last 30 minutes was like nothing we've seen in a very long time, especially in a game where United actually were fine for the first half. So yeah, there's a lot of question marks about what Ten Hag is doing between then and Thursday. So yeah, I'm interested to see what kind of performance we see against Betis. I think that will confirm whether this is a blip or not.
Lyes, do you think as well then that it needs that kind of reaction? Because I think Mikey made a good point there. You probably don't have enough time to go and do a 13k run and to kind of have that kind of impact. And it's the same squad that started that won the Carabao Cup final just a week ago. Do you think it is more of a, you know what, that is a game that we've just got to forget about and move on? Or do you think there has to be kind of a reaction from Ten Hag towards the players?
I think it's almost a mix of both, to be honest with you. The fixture list has been crazy, and it's not getting any less crazy. You are going to have games coming thick and fast, 3 games a week in all 3 competitions that you're still in. So they are absolutely going to have to just, as hard as it's going to be, pretend like that didn't happen and just keep the rear view mirrors forward. Just focus on the task ahead. The season is still long. There's still 3 competitions that they're fighting for. They still have a lot to play for. They still had a good season. Like, this shouldn't be what defines what's so far been a successful first year for Ten Hag. At the same time, though, I'm definitely of the belief that heads have to roll after that kind of performance, man. Like, you can't just pretend. Like, you could. I'm saying, like, leave it in the past, but also we can't just pretend that didn't just happen. We have to address some of those performances, like you said. Some of these players cannot just go back into the 11 and pretend like, oh, last weekend didn't happen. That performance didn't just happen. So it has to be a mix. They have to stay focused on what still could be a very successful season for United, but that is going to hurt that dressing room and that club and our fans and Erik ten Hag for a very long time. Like, that's salt in the wounds right there. That's not going to just disappear overnight.
Well, for sure, and hopefully, actually, as a fan, you'd think maybe you use that as a reason, get a result against Southampton and put a foot back onto the Premier League. I'll go back to you as well then. What do you think was the most concerning thing from that game exactly? I think we'll talk about the players after, but was it just the attitude, the way the heads rolled, or they lost their heads? Is there like one pinpoint thing that you think was the most disappointing?
I think that last point is the most disappointing, because I agree with you, Zach, that the exhaustion amongst that squad was bound to kick in eventually with the amount of games that they're playing. And it's fine. There are ways to lose, right? I actually didn't think United would go to Anfield this weekend and get a result. I thought that this would be the first loss that they had in 11 games. But there's a way to lose. And when you go down 2-0, 3-0, make it respectable at that point. 3-0 already, it might not be respectable, but at least make it a professional scoreline. And some of the attitudes and the mentality that kind of kicked in after 3, after 4, was reminiscent of what we've seen under Jose, under Oli, under Ralf Rangnick. And that's something that as a fan base, we had kind of thought was in the past. Ten Hag had instilled this new never say die mentality. So to see a lot of guys that have been so good for United this year drop their heads down and just accept an absolute thumping by Liverpool, for a team that's their entire ethos this year is defensive solidity, rigidness, mentality. That for me was by far the most disappointing thing to see.
Do you think then, let's touch upon Erik ten Hag here, because I think he kind of echoes your thoughts there. Erik ten Hag said, I saw 11 individuals losing their heads, not sticking to the plan. That is unprofessional. He said, stick together. That is what we didn't do. I haven't seen this from my team. I don't think it's us. McCubbs, do you think he should have, as you said, as we've said, that maybe when it got to 3-0, get another defender on. Let's make sure we don't concede another goal here. Let's not make this any worse. And I guess there is a respectable manner of, look, I believe in my game plan. I believe in my players. We can get, and let's be fair, at 3-0, you might think we can get a goal back, and then it's 3-1, and you might get another one, so on and so forth. But do you think you kind of feel like it's going to get worse, and maybe a more defensive-minded substitute should have happened?
Potentially. I mean, he did bring on McTominay for Fred. He took off Weghorst. In many ways, he didn't. Yeah, I wouldn't have taken off Weghorst personally. I know he's like a limited player, and his influence in an attacking sense was not really there at all in the game. But from a defensive standpoint, he still offers a fair amount. I think, taking Fred off, I think they were mistakes at that point in the game, because McTominay offered nothing really from a defensive standpoint when he came on. But equally, I think in some ways it's like at that point in the game, you still have to trust your best players, and all of your best players were pretty much on the pitch. You're 3-0 down. You've got a back line and Casemiro in front of them, who have very rarely let you down at all that season. I don't really think you can put it on Ten Hag that much, just because there aren't any upgrades on the bench. United's squad is still not deep enough that you can afford to take off Varane or Lissandro, or take off Casemiro. And I think to go to 6 at the back at Anfield on 58 minutes, I just don't think it's just not viable, really. I think that the squad of players, the 11 players out there on the pitch, are more than good enough technically to be able to hold even a good Liverpool team at bay on the performances this season. And that's, I think we'll get onto this, I guess, but this is where it was most shocking. You saw Varane, Lissandro, Luke Shaw. Oh my God, Luke Shaw, Casemiro. I single out Luke Shaw there. I think he just had the most bad moments, but like none of those players played anywhere near their best. I mean, Casemiro, put in probably one of the worst performances I've seen from him in his career. So, I think it is very much on the players in that sense. I don't know. Maybe this is just me being a United fan and a Ten Hag, acolyte, not acolyte, Ten Hag kind of worshipper almost. Yeah, just because I've been so impressed with what he's done so far. Maybe I am letting him off the hook a little bit. And there are certain tactical things that I think he maybe didn't get right. I think, in hindsight, maybe Weghorst wasn't the guy to start at 10. Maybe Bruno should have started at 10 and we'd had Rashford on the left instead. But none of those tactical choices led to what happened in that second half.
And I do wonder as well, I don't think Erik Ten Hag wins in any way, shape or form. Say he does put Harry Maguire or a defender on, right? Yeah. And at 3-0, and say you do just lose 3-0, I think you have people come out in the media afterwards and go, well, we're Manchester United, why are we accepting a 3-0 loss? We should be coming out and trying to go and get that game back in. And I think that's the kind of, in that scenario, you never win. I mean, Lyes, what do you kind of think in terms of that? And also, who's the number one player you felt most let down by?
First of all, I'm a huge Erik Ten Hag fan as well. If you want to talk about worshipper, I probably fall in that category as well. But I actually put a bit of blame on him, a big bit of blame, because like I said, there's ways to lose. There's absolutely ways to lose. And I agree that, look, bringing on McTominay or bringing on someone else wouldn't have done a huge difference. But I'm thinking, I remember the last 5-10 minutes. If anyone wants to go watch that game back, I know it'll be extremely painful as a United fan, but the last 5 to 10 minutes, you're literally seeing waves of Liverpool 5 players counterattacking at 3 United players. With 10 minutes left in the game, it was like it was the first 5 minutes and it was an open game. At some point, and this is something that one of the few criticisms I have of Erik Ten Hag, I feel like he's too stubborn in his methods, and that he's not willing at times to kind of sacrifice his ideology and just admit that his team has been second best and shut up shop. Because I saw it against City, where City could have easily scored 8 or 9. They were fortunate to only concede 6 that day. In this game, with 5 minutes left, 4-0, 5-0, 6-0, as a manager, seeing your team that open, you can't just sit there and accept it like he did. I'm not saying that he should have brought certain individuals or this guy would have changed, bringing on Maguire would have changed anything, but at some point you just have to bring your midfield closer to your defense. Maybe push your defense back 10 yards, 15 yards. You just have to basically shut up shop, admit that you're second best on the day, and I don't think he did that. I feel like he almost watched on the sidelines as his team was literally second best to every single second ball, loose ball, everything. As for, sorry, you asked me too, the player that I was most disappointed with.
Yeah, exactly.
They were all, for me, 0 out of 10s. I don't think you can say any one player was worse than the rest, but one player for me that I've kind of got to my wit's end with is Antony, in my opinion. Because, and again, he wasn't the worst player on the day, even though that first half, I think, United were killed on his side because of his failure to track back Robertson. I think that was a huge tactical flaw in Erik Ten Hag's setup. But Antony, for me, is a player that, quite frankly, I think I've lost my patience with, in terms of giving him time, in terms of saying, okay, maybe give him a year, give him a few more games. I feel like I'm at a point with Antony now where I know what kind of player he is. And I'm a big believer that in the Premier League, especially, as a winger, you need to be able to do 3 things to a high level, or one of 3 things to a high level. You either have to be a great creator from out wide. I think of a Riyad Mahrez or a Bukayo Saka. You have to be a great individual 1v1 player, say a Sadio Mane or an Eden Hazard. Or you have to be a goal-scoring winger with tremendous movement, like a Mo Salah. And I don't think Antony falls in any of those 3. I look at him almost as like a more janky Ziyech, to be honest with you, who also hasn't lit the world up since he came to the Premier League. So Antony was not the worst player for me on Sunday. I think they were all horrible, but he's one player that for me, I'm slowly losing my patience with. And I've given him time because, again, I'm a huge Erik Ten Hag fan, and I want to give his signings especially the benefit of the doubt. But the more I watch this guy, the more I question the methodology behind bringing him in.
It's tough with Antony McCubbin, isn't it? Because I think he's somebody, as I said, like, you do want to sit there and you want to believe that Erik Ten Hag got it right. Because Martinez, I think we can all happily sit here and say, okay, look, the game against Liverpool, sure. But Martinez has been a successful signing, and that was somebody he worked with. And Anthony at Ajax was somebody that was hugely successful. But I think we are right there in thinking we're not necessarily seeing much on the pitch. Do you agree?
What, from Anthony,
Yeah.
do you mean? I mean, I guess this game was, a little bit symbolic of maybe an area where Ten Hag has got it wrong, or at least the club under Ten Hag has got it wrong in terms of the transfer markets, in that, United were punished by Cody Gakpo, a player who Ten Hag wanted, but ended up prioritising Anthony over, meaning that the club didn't end up having the funds available for Cody Gakpo in the winter. So, I know that's a bit reductive, but at the same time, Gakpo was the much more effective player for Liverpool on the day. He would, in some ways at least, solve United's centre-forward problem at the moment and allow Rashford to play on the left permanently, whereas we saw Bruno Fernandes on the left for a lot of the game. Anthony has been inconsistent, to say the least. I think he's only created something like 9 chances this season in the Premier League. I was hearing earlier in the offices that I think James Tarkowski has created more, which is pretty depressing. You see glimpses from Anthony that he does. I mean, I've kind of said it since he signed. He is great at one thing, which is cutting in onto his left foot. His technique just outside the box in the half space is brilliant, but £95 million or whatever it is, 95 million euros maybe it was actually. That's far too much for a player who just does that. And in this game he wasn't tracking back enough, of course. I think unless he improves massively, I think Anthony, he could become potentially a little bit of a problem. I think at the moment he still does offer that balance on the right hand side where you want you want Rashford to be either in the centre or on the left. Jadon Sancho, I think he was not fully fit for this game. Personally, if he was fully fit, I would have had him, probably brought him on for Anthony quite early on in that second half, just because he offers more control than Anthony does. I think he's a better ball carrier. I think actually on the right hand side, although he hasn't played there much for United, I still prefer him there because at least he can cut in and create chances. I think in that sense, I think this will be a wake-up.
Do you drop
call for
him for the
hopefully.
next game?
I think I would potentially drop him anyway. Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think it's as a result of this Liverpool performance, but I would like to see Jadon Sancho given more minutes from the start for United, and I think it might be worth dropping Anthony for sure.
Okay, the next player I want to touch upon, because obviously I think he, out of probably everyone, was the most spoken about after the game. He was the captain of the side. I think Bruno Fernandes is the guy we got to chat about.
Yep.
Now, there were obviously rumours that he wanted to come off as well towards the sideline. Manchester United have actually said that's not true, but that's what was obviously believed if you watched the game. He completed 33 tackles. He had a 33 tackle percentage completion rate, got dispossessed several times, committed 3 fouls, was offside twice, lashed out at the linesman, lashed out at the opposition. Lars, where do you kind of feel at the moment with Bruno? Because I think Bruno on his best day is arguably the best player on the pitch. On his worst day, he can be awful. Where do you kind of feel with Bruno at the moment?
I mean, that lunge or whatever it was at the assistant referee was probably the most passion he actually showed the entire day. So I'll give him that. Bruno, for me, is probably the most... He's an enigma for me, honestly. Like, he's the most contrasting player, in my opinion, in the entire Premier League. Because like you said, there are days where Bruno Fernandes is simply unplayable. But there are also days where truly I don't even think his own manager completely trusts him, right? You look at Ten Hag's recent tactical setup in which he plays off the left or off the right in favor of Weghorst playing more in the 10, almost for more control, because Bruno at times with his passing can be so wayward. It's a real puzzling one for me because he is the captain. And I still stand by the fact that he is a great leader. I think he represents the club exceptionally well. I think he's had a successful season this year. But I still think going forward for United, right? And this is besides his petulance and his whining, because I think that you take the good with the bad about Bruno, right?
Sure.
When United win and they're on fire and he's scoring goals, fans love seeing that side of players. Like I think of a Diego Costa, for example. The opposition hates him. When he's on your team, you absolutely love him. I see that with Bruno a lot too. But as a player, I had my my doubts the start of the season, and I still have my doubts, to be honest, long term, whether he can be a viable solution in midfield for an Erik ten Hag team who this season are playing more in transition. They are sitting a little deeper. They are playing a bit more counterattacking football. In my opinion, more so to suit what Erik ten Hag has at his disposal this season. But I think going forward, Erik ten Hag would like to play a style of play that sees his team more as the protagonist in games. And I don't know if you can do that with Bruno as focally as he is in midfield. And I think that's why you've seen him more on the wing. So going forward long term, I have question marks over that guy, to be honest.
Who would you be would you be dropping him for the next game, or would you be looking to, as you said, in the summer, look to replace him? Where's that future lie for you then? Are you looking to sell him on? It's a tough question, I know, especially when, as you mentioned, on his day, he's amazing and he's someone that you love, and you are right, that passion that we see on the pitch when it's going well is absolutely adored by United fans. But say like Sunday, where he's putting his arms up because he's misplaced a pass, it can be also go against him. What do you think? Is it somewhere where, okay, maybe you do play an Anthony, Sancho and Rashford kind of front three? Like, how does it quite work for you?
It's a weird one. The reason I was kind of like wincing a bit is because like there's no one really else. That's the problem of United this season. Like their depth isn't great. So you can talk about dropping Bruno, but is the guy who's coming in for him really going to light the world on fire, change United's fortunes like that? I'm not 100% convinced. We've seen Sancho play at times in the 10. We've seen Weghorst recently play in the 10. I think I would continue playing Bruno, to be honest with you. I think this season they do need him because, like I said, he gives them a bit of X factor in terms of a player who can really take over games by himself. When you look at what United have in that regard, I see Rashford and I see Bruno, and perhaps they're missing it offensively at least. So this season, I think I would continue sticking with him. But I think going into the summer, even the summer after that, I think you look at United's pursuit of Frankie de Jong. You hear the rumors around Jude Bellingham, even though I think the 7-0 probably won't do them much of a favor in terms of trying to attract him now. But I think you look at the direction in terms of what midfielders Erik ten Hag is looking for: physical athletes, technicians, pass masters. I don't know if Bruno Fernandes really falls into that. So I think this season they stick with him because he might be the best that they have. But I think going forward, his position will definitely be under scrutiny.
Okay, well, one final person I want to touch upon, and actually I think I kind of single him out. I think maybe he can count for the whole of the defence. I think Luke Shaw possibly had one of his worst days in a United shirt. It's tough with Luke Shaw because I also feel like a couple of weeks ago we sat here going, is he the best left back in the world with what he's doing right now? And then you jump forward a week and it's kind of like the story of Luke Shaw's career, right, McCubbin?
A little bit. I mean, sure. He's gone from huge highs to pretty crushing lows. I mean, even in the first half against Liverpool, he was doing stuff. In the opposition third, I was that ball for Rashford and the turn that he pulls off before that ball as well. He looked great in that first half from an attacking standpoint, at least. But I think this is where actually Ten Hag actually has probably the easiest decision to make. I think it's very, very easy to make a statement here. I think against Betis, he may have even done it anyway for the sake of resting players and for the sake of fitness. Shaw out, Malacia in, and I think also Dalot out and Wan-Bissaka in as well. Like I think they're just no-brainers. Those are the two positions in the squad where you've got ready-made backups who aren't too much of a step down. I know Malacia from an attacking point is quite a step down on Shaw, but defensively he's rarely put a foot wrong this season. I think that's where you go. I mean, we can talk about Luke Shaw's performance all day, to be honest. It was just
he out of everyone felt like he lost his head.
Full of mistakes. Yeah, he lost his head. He lost his positioning. In the bit I was watching back, was it the second Salah goal where he just tries to hoof it, but does it bounce off Firmino or something? It's just like it was like park football at that point. It was like an angry kid who's had a really bad game, and he just wasn't thinking at all. But I think if we bring it back to Bruno, I do think he is culpable in many ways. It's not just as an individual; he is the captain on that field, and this is why I kind of am reticent to criticise Ten Hag too much, because this is a very experienced player, Bruno, and he is leading a side also with, Casemiro, who has great leadership qualities, Varane, who, is also an on-the-pitch leader, a very experienced head. And at some point in that second half, players have to manage themselves, especially like Casemiro and Varane. They were a part of a team that managed itself very well under Zidane. That was part of the reason why they were, so good in the Champions League for so many years, won 3 in a row and whatnot. That was a big part of their success, was the ability of these senior players to manage themselves. So I agree with you, Lyes. I think Bruno, it's hard to drop him because, especially with Eriksen out injured, there just isn't really anyone who can occupy that role unless you were there unless you were to give Sancho that responsibility. But then I don't know. I just don't think he's played there enough, to be honest. So that's a tough one. I think, it's almost impossible to drop Bruno, but I think Ten Hag will have had some serious words with him. I know Luke Shaw came out either today or yesterday saying that they were going to be made to watch the match back. That's very standard, but it was telling that he was, quite open about that. I think he will be getting the players to watch that game back at least once, and I think Bruno will have probably, experienced the wrath of Ten Hag there as his on-pitch captain. I think his attitude did. It felt like it then bled into the rest of the team, and that is a big concern in terms of the culture of the side. I really like Bruno. I actually don't have. I actually think he's not really a concern for me in terms of the kind of medium to long term until his numbers really drop off in a big way. I don't think we need to be too concerned about him in terms of the system that Ten Hag plays, that 4-2-3-1. I think he's still, one of the best number 10s out there. But yeah, like when it's bad and, his attitude, it clearly can be a problem, as we saw on Sunday.
Okay, Lyes, just quickly to touch on last thoughts about the defence. Are you hugely concerned about it? Like, I feel like sitting here talking about Varane and Martinez, two guys who actually this season have shown they are pretty capable. It feels more easier to them to be like, you know what, it's a one-off than to really, really go into them.
No, I agree. Look, I mean, before this game, I was of the belief that, and you know what, I still probably feel that way because I still feel that a 30-game plus evidence supersedes one half of football that, look, if I see it replicated again over the next few weeks, fair enough. But I still trust in this defense, to be honest with you, as crazy as it might sound coming off a 7-0 loss. But I think Varane and Lisandro still are one of the finer defensive pairings in the league. I would continue playing with them, and especially with Casemiro in front of them. I agree, though, that Luke Shaw from Malacia is probably the easiest decision Erik ten Hag has to make because although I actually think Luke Shaw is a tremendous talent, I think at left back there's very few fullbacks in world football who combine defensive resoluteness with going forward. But I think that performance, that second half was, without being hyperbolic here, maybe the worst left back performance I've ever seen in my life. It was that poor. So I think that decision is relatively easy for him because I think Malacia has really done well as of late. And I think Dalot, to be honest with you as well, since the World Cup, has almost had like a bit of a hangover, to be honest with you. I don't think he's replicated anywhere near his performances in the first half where he was so impressive. So I think in that area as well, Ten Hag's decision is pretty easy. Bringing back in Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who, since he's been integrated into the team again, has looked pretty good. So I think those two fullback areas is probably the easiest decisions that Erik ten Hag has to make. But for the most part, I keep saying it, and again, it sounds crazy after this result, but that spine of Casemiro, Lisandro, and Varane, I feel comfortable with them. I feel confident with them, and I just have to hope that that kind of result is behind us, and we can kind of look forward and just charge it to the game.
I mean, I would not want to have been in that dressing room after the final whistle, that's for sure. But there we have it. Manchester United done. No more talking about them unless they lose to Real Betis. Fingers crossed indeed. Lyes, thank you so much, mate, for joining us. I really appreciate it. We'll put all your links and everything in the description below. Thank you so much for joining us. You guys at home, let us know which players should be dropped. What should Erik ten Hag be thinking next for Manchester United? If you've enjoyed the video, then click on screen right now for some more Football Daily content. And as always, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe.